A proud young woman's single act of cruelty toward a helpless old woman triggers a curse that slowly destroys her beauty, dignity, and peace until she is forced to confront the true cost of arrogance. The sun rose gently over the village of Omra, spilling golden light across red earth roads and small mud-walled compounds. Roosters crowed loudly, announcing the start of another day, and the air was filled with the soft murmur of early activity. Women stepped out with brooms, sweeping the dust that had settled overnight, their hands moving rhythmically as if keeping time with the heartbeat of the village itself. Men adjusted their hats and carried tools toward the fields, preparing for the long hours of labor that awaited them. Children ran barefoot, their laughter echoing between the houses, a sound both innocent and piercing in its clarity. Omra was not just a place, it was a world tightly bound by stories, whispers, and shared memories. Here, nothing stayed hidden. Every word, every gesture, every misstep was noticed, noted, and remembered. Even a small smile or a brief frown could travel faster than the morning wind. The villagers moved with careful familiarity, knowing their neighbors as intimately as their own reflections. Each morning brought the comfort of routine, but also the quiet pressure to conform, to uphold appearances, and to honor the unwritten rules that held the village together. As the day unfolded, carts rattled down the narrow lanes, carrying produce to the market. Chickens clucked and scratched in the dust, while the scent of fresh bread and roasted corn floated through the air. Elderly women gathered near doorways, exchanging news with knowing glances, their eyes sharp and observant. Children, though young, were already aware of the unspoken hierarchies that governed their tiny world. One question lingered silently in every mind, heavy with expectation: who will stumble today, and who will rise above? Among this organized chaos, every face told a story. A widow bent with years of toil walked slowly to fetch water from the stream. A young boy dashed past a stall, narrowly avoiding the legs of a laughing goat. The village thrummed with life, yet beneath the surface lay judgment and memory, a subtle undercurrent that reminded every villager of their place. No action was ever private. Even the smallest act, an unkind word, a fleeting glance, could ripple through the community, carried by whispers and repeated in the marketplace. As the sun climbed higher, the dust shimmered in the heat, giving the village a surreal, almost timeless quality. Paths wound between compounds in familiar patterns, each corner stage for the daily dramas of human life. People greeted each other with careful words, gestures loaded with meaning beyond mere politeness. Here, reputation was as vital as air, and honor could vanish in a moment of carelessness. In Omra, every day was a test, not only of endurance but of how one treated others, how one balanced pride and humility. And yet, the village was beautiful in its simplicity and its honesty. Life was not easy, but it was real, and every villager, from the oldest elder to the youngest child, carried their role with silent pride. The rhythms of Omra continued, unbroken and unwavering, a reminder that in a place where everyone knows everyone, even the smallest act could become unforgettable. Maya walked through the village with a confidence that seemed to part the air around her. The sun caught her skin, making it glow like polished bronze, and her eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned everyone she passed. Heads turned, whispers followed, and men could not hide their admiration. Yet, for all the attention, there was a hardness in Maya's gaze, a coldness that warned others to keep their distance. She carried herself as though the world owed her respect simply for existing, and in many ways, the villagers knew she believed it. From a young age, Maya's beauty had drawn attention. It was said she could stop a man's heart with a glance, and she reveled in that power. She laughed openly at those who approached her politely, dismissing their efforts with sharp words or a haughty glance. Women watched her carefully, some in envy, others in silent warning, while elders shook their heads quietly. Beauty without humility is dangerous, they murmured, but Maya paid them no mind. Why should I bend for anyone when I am already above them? She thought, and the idea felt as natural to her as breathing. Her father, a kind man with a deep love for his only child, indulged her behavior. Whenever Maya spoke rudely, he laughed it off. Whenever neighbors complained about her arrogance, he defended her fiercely. She knows her worth, he would say, a proud smile on his face. And so, Maya grew up believing that admiration alone was the measure of a person's value. She did not bow to elders, she did not help the poor, and she felt no shame in humiliating those who sought her favor. One afternoon in the bustling market, a young man greeted her politely, "Good afternoon, Maya." She looked him up and down, her lips curling into a derisive smile. "Stand aside," she snapped. "You are not my class." The man's face flushed, and the villagers nearby murmured among themselves. Maya felt a thrill of satisfaction, power coursing through her veins, proof that her beauty gave her control. And yet, beneath the pride and the laughter, there was a subtle emptiness, a quiet longing she could not name. Is admiration enough to fill the heart, or does it simply echo back the emptiness I feel inside? But she quickly dismissed the thought, unwilling to admit even to herself that perhaps the power she wielded was not as complete as she believed. As she moved through the village, commanding attention without effort, Maya's actions left a trail of whispered gossip, offended hearts, and quiet resentment. People admired her, yes, but they also feared her. Fear and respect were intertwined in a dangerous dance, one that Maya did not fully notice. She walked confidently, but every step, every glance, every harsh word slowly built a wall between her and the community she claimed to own. The afternoon sun hung high and merciless, scorching the red earth roads of Omra. Maya balanced the clay pot on her head, her wrapper tied tightly around her waist, every step deliberate and precise. The village was quiet in the heat, only the distant crow of a rooster and the faint rustle of leaves disturbed the stillness. She moved with confidence, unaware that her life was about to change with the simplest of encounters. From the corner of her eye, Maya noticed a figure slowly approaching. It was an old woman, bent with age, her white hair scattered across a worn and tired face. Her clothes were faded and torn, and the dust of the village clung to her feet. The woman stopped in front of Maya, raising her eyes with quiet humility. "My daughter," she said softly, her voice trembling yet steady, "please, may I drink a little water? I have been walking since morning and am very thirsty." Maya's steps faltered slightly, a flash of annoyance crossing her face. "Why now? Why here, in my path, demanding my time?" she thought, her pride bristling. She looked at the woman sharply, her lips curling in irritation. "Get out of my way, old woman," she snapped. "Do I look like your daughter?" Her words were loud, cutting through the quiet of the empty road. Villagers nearby paused, sensing the tension that had suddenly filled the air. The old woman lowered her gaze slightly, showing neither anger nor fear. "Just a sip," she repeated softly, her tone pleading yet calm. "Just one sip of water. That is all I ask." Maya felt an unexpected surge of insult. How dare this frail creature presume to approach her, to slow her steps and interrupt her? "Move away from my road," she shouted, her voice trembling not with fear, but with pride. "Is it my responsibility to take care of every old woman in this village?" For a long moment, the old woman remained still, her bent frame unwavering in the heat. Her eyes, though tired, held a depth that seemed to look straight into Maya's soul. A hush fell over the few villagers who had stopped to watch. The air felt heavier, charged with something unspoken yet powerful. Maya's own heartbeat quickened, a strange unease brushing against her pride. "This is ridiculous," she thought, forcing herself to laugh nervously, yet the chill crawling up her spine refused to fade. Then, in a moment that would change everything, Maya raised her hand and struck the old woman across the face. The sound echoed through the empty street. The clay pot atop her head wobbled, spilling water onto the ground, a sharp reminder of her anger's recklessness. The villagers gasped. The old woman staggered slightly, but did not fall, did not cry, and did not shout. Slowly, she lifted her head, her eyes now deep, calm, and frightening in their clarity. "You have laid your hand on what you do not understand," she said, her voice low but steady, carrying a weight that silenced the world around them. Maya felt a chill rush through her body, a cold dread that made her laugh hollowly to hide her unease. The heat of the afternoon seemed to press down harder as Maya's anger surged. Every word of the old woman, every plea, felt like an insult to her pride. The villagers had stopped, forming a quiet circle of witnesses, their eyes wide with anticipation and unease. "How dare she slow me down?" Maya thought, her chest tightening with a mix of fury and disbelief. The clay pot wobbled atop her head, water dripping onto the dry red dust below. Then, in a heartbeat, her hand shot out. The sharp slap landed across the old woman's face with a sound that cracked the silence of the street. Villagers gasped, stepping back, some clutching their mouths in shock. The old woman staggered slightly, but her feet remained firm. Her white hair shifted in the wind, her wrinkled face calm, almost unyielding. The sun caught the glint in her eyes, and Maya felt something chill and powerful pass through her, a warning she could not yet name. "You have laid your hand on what you do not understand," the old woman said, her voice low but piercing, carrying a weight that seemed to bend the very air. The words were strange, yet deliberate, each syllable striking deeper than Maya's own anger. A shiver ran down Maya's spine, but she laughed nervously, brushing off the sensation. It's just words, she thought, trying to convince herself, yet deep inside, a strange fear began to bloom. The villagers held their breath as the old woman straightened her bent back, her presence somehow magnified, as if the years of her life had distilled into a quiet, terrifying power. For your pride, she said, her tone steady, you will desire men without control. When you see them, your strength will leave you. Your beauty will become your shame. You will beg and peace will flee from you. A sudden wind whipped through the narrow road, lifting dust into the air and rattling the trees. The villagers instinctively covered their faces, shielding themselves from the swirl of power that seemed to pulse around the old woman. Then, as suddenly as it had arrived, the figure was gone. Not walking, not fading slowly, gone. A silence heavier than any words fell over the village. Even the birds seemed to hush, sensing the end of something ordinary and the beginning of something beyond comprehension. Maya stood frozen, her heart hammering in her chest. The warmth of the sun could no longer comfort her. Her hands shook and a strange emptiness gnawed at her pride. For the first time, fear touched her, sharp and undeniable. The villagers slowly stepped back, whispering, glancing at each other, unsure if what they had witnessed was real or warning from some unseen force. And in that silence, Maya understood that a single moment of anger had changed everything, her life, her future, and the world she thought she controlled. Night fell over Omara, heavy and still, blanketing the village in darkness. Maya lay on her mat inside her small hut, the soft glow of the moon spilling through the cracks in the walls. At first, she tried to sleep, telling herself that the day had been long, that the sun and heat had simply worn her down. But a strange restlessness stirred within her, a sensation she could not shake. Her heart beat faster than usual, and an unfamiliar tightness gripped her chest. Why do I feel like this? She wondered, tossing from one side to the other. She tried to close her eyes, to tell herself it was only imagination, yet the unease would not fade. Every sound, the distant barking of a dog, the rustle of the wind through the trees, made her jump. Her body felt as if it had a life separate from her mind, trembling and restless, responding to something she could not see. The heat of the day lingered, but this was different. It was not physical discomfort, this was something deeper, more unsettling. Maya rose from her mat and stepped outside, hoping that the cool night air would calm her racing heart. The village roads were empty, bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. Everything seemed normal, yet she could not shake the sensation that the world around her had subtly shifted. A shiver ran down her spine, and she pressed her hands to her chest. It's nothing, just nerves, she told herself, trying to dismiss the fear. But deep inside, a quiet voice whispered that something had changed, that the encounter with the old woman was not an ordinary moment of anger, it had consequences far greater than she could imagine. Her beauty, her pride, and her confidence all felt suddenly fragile, as if an invisible force had taken hold of her very being. She moved back to her hut, each step heavy and uncertain, and sat on the floor, her body trembling in ways she did not understand. Her mind raced, recalling the old woman's words, for your pride, you will desire men without control. Your beauty will become your shame. Peace will flee from you. Maya had laughed when she heard them earlier, dismissing them as superstition. Yet now, alone in the night, the words replayed in her mind with a weight she could not ignore. Was it possible that a single act, a single moment of cruelty, could reach into the quiet of the night and begin to unravel her life? She shivered and buried her face in her hands, feeling both disbelief and a strange, rising fear. I cannot control this, what has she done to me? The restlessness continued, subtle at first, but persistent, as though a shadow had settled over her mind and body, waiting patiently to reveal itself fully. The night stretched on, long and merciless, with Maya unable to find comfort. The curse had begun, silently, invisibly, and she had no idea how it would grow, how it would shape the days to come. The first taste of fear had entered her life, and with it, a lesson she could not yet name. Actions have consequences, and pride can invite ruin even in the quietest moments. The days that followed were unlike anything Maya had ever known. At first, the sensations she felt were small, almost unnoticeable, a fluttering in her chest, a sudden tightness in her limbs, but they grew quickly, unstoppable and fierce. Every time she saw a man, even from a distance, a strange compulsion seized her body, bending her will in ways she could not resist. Her mind screamed for control, but her body betrayed her, forcing actions she could neither understand nor stop. The first time it happened in public, it was subtle. A man she had once laughed at in the market walked past, and Maya felt the heat rise in her face, her legs weakening. She grasped the wall of the stall to steady herself, but the villagers had already noticed. Eyes widened, whispers began, and the unease spread like fire. Why is this happening to me? Maya thought in desperation, her heart pounding with both shame and confusion. As days passed, the pattern repeated and grew worse. At the stream, while fetching water, a man appeared and Maya felt the same uncontrollable urge. She faltered, embarrassed, and the sound of her own voice calling out in distress carried through the air. People stared openly now, the secret of her curse could no longer be hidden. Men who had once admired her from afar now looked at her with shock and disbelief, while women murmured warnings to their husbands and children. Maya tried to retreat, to hide herself in her heart, but the curse seemed patient and cruel. Even brief encounters with men in the village, a polite greeting, a passing glance, triggered the same loss of control. Her beauty, which had once been her weapon, became a trap, drawing attention not for admiration, but for the spectacle of her humiliation. The pride she had once worn so proudly now felt like a fragile mask cracking in public view. She wandered the village roads, avoiding anyone who might glance her way, yet there was no escape. Children pointed, whispering stories to each other, elders shook their heads, saddened and puzzled, men stared with discomfort and fear. Every step she took reminded her that the world she had once dominated with her beauty and arrogance had turned against her. Is this what it means to be powerless? She asked herself, a tear slipping down her cheek. Maya's shame was no longer private, it had become a public spectacle, a story whispered in every corner of Omra. Her laughter and pride, once intoxicating, were replaced by trembling silence and frantic attempts to cover her face. She longed for peace, for control, for the life she had taken for granted, but the curse was relentless. Every encounter reminded her that pride, when unchecked, can lead to suffering beyond imagination. And as she sat alone at the edge of the market, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon her, Maya realized that admiration without humility can quickly turn into isolation and disgrace. The lesson was bitter, painful, and unavoidable. Days turned into weeks, and the whispers that once followed Maya now became silent avoidance. The villagers crossed to the other side of the road when she approached. Doors that had once opened to greet her stayed firmly shut. Children no longer waved, women no longer smiled, and men no longer dared meet her eyes. Where admiration and fear had mingled before, only fear remained now, sharp, tangible, and isolating. Maya wandered through her once familiar streets, her steps heavy and tentative. The heat of the sun felt harsher, the dust of the road clingier, and the empty stares of strangers weighed on her like stones. How did it come to this? She whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the soft wind that rustled the leaves. Pride had once lifted her above others, but now it seemed to press her down, crushing her from the inside out. Her house became a refuge, a place where she could hide from the judgment of the village and the relentless curse that followed her every glance at a man. Even within these walls, restlessness clung to her. Nights were the hardest. The silence of the hut seemed to echo the loneliness that had grown inside her heart. Every action of the past replayed in vivid detail, the insults, the laughter, the cruel dismissals. Maya could no longer hide from the truth of her arrogance. She bowed her head over her knees, tears slipping freely. I have hurt so many, and for what? The thought consumed her. She wanted forgiveness, but she did not know where to find it. Her heart ached for the old woman she had struck, the one who had shown strength, patience, and wisdom. If only she could turn back time, apologize, and undo the damage. The realization that she could not change her sorrow into a deeper, aching humility. At the market, she caught glimpses of the villagers. They did not sneer, nor did they whisper, this was worse. They looked through her, as if she were invisible, a shadow of the proud woman she had once been. Each avoidance, each cautious glance away, reminded her of the weight of her cruelty. Alone, she whispered prayers into the night, asking silently for a chance to make amends, to undo her wrongs, and to find a path back to compassion. Maya had learned, painfully and irreversibly, that beauty and pride are hollow without respect, humility, and care for others. Her world had shrunk to the size of her small heart, her heart heavy with regret, yet the first seeds of understanding had taken root. She finally recognized that power used without empathy is a curse in itself, and that to be free, she would need more than luck, she would need to change her very self. Years had passed since that fateful day on the Red Earth Road, yet Maya's heart still carried the weight of her mistakes. She had lived in isolation, learned humility, and endured the silent whispers of her own shame. But nothing could have prepared her for the sudden, quiet presence that now stood before her. The old woman, bent, worn, yet impossibly strong in bearing, appeared as if she had stepped out of a memory, her eyes deep, calm, and unyielding. Maya dropped to her knees instantly, the ground beneath her a reminder of the humility she had learned but still struggled to claim fully. Tears ran freely down her cheeks, washing away the dust of years spent in silence and regret. Her voice trembled as she spoke, choking on the words she had kept inside for far too long. "Please forgive me," she whispered, the plea raw and desperate. "I was proud. I was cruel. I insulted, I harmed, I hurt without care. I did not know. I did not see." The villagers who passed by paused, sensing a moment heavy with more than just apology. They kept their distance, aware that this was a reckoning beyond their understanding. Maya's body shook as she lowered her forehead to the dirt, her entire being confessing through posture and silence what her voice could not fully express. "I have wasted so many years, and yet she appears again. Will she show mercy?" The old woman said nothing at first. She simply watched, her gaze steady and piercing, measuring the depth of Maya's remorse. In that moment, Maya understood that words alone would not suffice. She had learned that true change demanded action, not mere confession. "I will spend the rest of my life proving it," Maya sobbed, lifting her head just slightly, eyes glistening with a mixture of fear and hope. "I will serve those I once scorned. I will respect the weak and honor humility. I will never again let pride rule my heart. Please, I beg you, give me a chance to show it." The old woman's lips moved slowly, deliberately, forming words that weighed like gold and justice combined. "You have learned," she said softly, "but learning is not enough. True change is shown in action, not in words. Only when your deeds reflect your heart will freedom come." She lifted a thin hand and pressed it lightly against Maya's forehead. A warmth spread through Maya's body, dissolving the restlessness, the fear, and the shame that had haunted her for so long. For the first time, the weight lifted, leaving her breathless and yet lighter than she had ever felt. Maya sank back to her knees, this time in gratitude, not desperation. The village remained silent, witnessing the quiet miracle of redemption, but Maya's focus was inward, on the heart that now felt free, ready to act with kindness, humility, and care. The old woman turned and walked down the road, fading into the distance with the same quiet authority she had arrived with, leaving Maya to rise, reborn in understanding and resolve. The morning sun poured gently over Omra, painting the red earth roads in warm golden light. For the first time in years, Maya stepped outside her heart without fear pressing against her chest. The air felt lighter, the world calmer, and for the first time, she felt the freedom she had longed for, the weight of the curse finally lifted. But freedom, she knew, was not simply the absence of fear, it was a responsibility she now carried, the chance to rebuild a life that had been fractured by pride and cruelty. Maya walked slowly through the village, her head held not in arrogance, but in quiet respect. Children glanced at her and waved hesitantly, elders nodded in cautious approval, and men no longer avoided her entirely. She did not demand their recognition, nor did she expect forgiveness. Instead, she acted with humility, offering help where it was needed most, fetching water for the elderly, carrying firewood for widows, and offering her hands to those she had once scorned. Can true beauty be measured in deeds rather than looks? She wondered, feeling the answer settle deep in her heart. The villagers began to notice the change, whispers of admiration returning, but of a different kind, respect born not from fear, nor fascination with her beauty, but from witnessing her consistent kindness and humility. Maya's pride no longer ruled her, her beauty, once a weapon and a curse, became simply a part of her. She smiled quietly, the first smile free of arrogance, the first that reflected a heart transformed through suffering and understanding. At night, she would sit outside her heart, reflecting on the old woman who had taught her this painful, life-changing lesson. Was she a spirit? A teacher? A mirror of Maya's own flaws? Maya never knew, and it no longer mattered. What mattered was that the lesson had been learned, the growth achieved. She had endured humiliation, isolation, and fear, and emerged with a heart capable of empathy, a spirit capable of service. Her days became filled with action, not words, a steady dedication to living with compassion and humility. Slowly, trust returned, respect replaced fear, and peace found its way back into her life. She understood now that true beauty was not in the glow of her skin or the sharpness of her eyes, but in her ability to rise after falling, to honor others, and to serve without expectation. This is what it means to be truly free, she thought, letting the words echo in her heart. Maya's story, once a tale of pride and punishment, had become one of transformation and hope. She walked the roads of Omra humbly, no longer a figure of fear, but a symbol of redemption and strength. And every step she took, every hand she extended to help another, was a testament to the truth she had learned: life gives second chances, but only to those willing to change through action, not words.